I think urban gardening is really important because it really helps us see very clearly. Under that asphalt and under that concrete, there is soil. She has worth, and she has never lost her worth. And she has power, and she has never lost her power. But what has been done is she's been suffocated, she's been abused, she's been covered over, she's been told she's worthless. And what we do as gardeners is we come to that soil, and we're kind of like therapists. We say, hey, I understand what's happened to you. The same thing has happened to myself, and as I'm understanding what's happened to myself, I'm understanding what's happened to you. And let's come into a relationship again where we build each other up and help each other express our inner message. That's what we do as gardeners. My name is Farmer Rishi, and I am an urban gardener. Sometimes I call myself an urban peasant. The reason I got into it was more about my personal health. I think my stomach, more than anything, got me into gardening because I was just like having a lot of digestive problems, and I've had digestive problems my whole life, and so my stomach kind of guided me towards more nutritious food, and I was always trying to learn about like what I could eat to enliven my body. So this garden is at a church, and they had 7,500 square feet of lawn, flat lawn, all around me here. And the church community wanted to bring their landscape into line with their beliefs. And this is a Quaker organization. And so what we did in working with them and helping them is we came and we first understood, we first observed, what was going on here. So we came and we noticed, that there's a rooftop right here, which in the old way, all the water from that rooftop would shed off the rooftop and then end up on all the asphalt and all the streets around us. So we thought, okay, how can we keep that water moving more slowly through the land so that it's available for a longer time? We also noticed, of course, that the soil had been, really not taken care of for many, many years. And so just like when we are not taken care of, we kind of close up and we isolate ourselves. The soil does the exact same thing. When she's not taken care of, she closes up, she becomes hard, she becomes compact. She doesn't want the plant's roots. She doesn't want to talk to anyone. She doesn't want to communicate with anyone. She's not exchanging sugars with plant's roots. She's not housing microbes. So what we did was we did a little bit of soil therapy. We covered all the lawn. We covered it with cardboard, and then we covered that with horse manure. We covered that with wood chips. We covered that and then we put some compost in certain areas where we're going to be planting plants. So basically we said to the soil, hey, no one's taken care of you for a long time. We are going to, here's a sign of our commitment. We're going to do this. We're going to basically give you this buffet. We're going to give you everything you want to start with. And then once, we give the soil is fed, and she's a little bit satisfied, then we can when we start putting our plants, putting the trees in, putting some of the native plants in, spreading the wildflower seeds. So that's, the basic process. In your typical form of gardening, even in your standard, I would say organic gardening, the way that you view yourself, the role that you think that you have in the garden, right? There's this sense of needing to control and needing to be the master of and being in charge of, on top of. We're constantly like buying things to fix, things are broken and they need to be fixed. And that, again, it just kind of, it ends up spiraling a little, out of control, which is basically like where our agriculture is today. It's just the need to control has basically led us to just, essentially rape the land and then wonder, hey, what's wrong with the soil? Like, I don't get it. Like, you kind of step back and look at it, it all makes sense. I do a visualization with all my students in my classes, and I always ask them to visualize themselves in their garden, and how big of a role do they feel in their garden. Inevitably, most people come back and say, like, oh, I felt like there's so much I had to do, and there's, you know, like there's so many things for me to take care of. That sense of having a big role is true. That's one part of it, you know. But then you kind of gotta zoom up and see yourself in the garden from that bird's eye view, and see that you're just like the squirrel, you know, kind of running around. That you're not the controller. You're not in charge. You have a role. You know, you have a role in this body. The shift that I present in regenerative gardening is that we just need to find out what our role is, right? And we're not necessarily in control. We can have a big role, especially in a garden that has been really, you know, it's soil that has been very abused. You can have a tremendous role, especially in the beginning, in helping to uplift that soil. But as that garden matures, you'll see that your role kind of diminishes to the point where you're just, like I said, you're just like the squirrel, you're just like the bird, you're just like the worm. That's kind of the perspective shift. And then on a practical aspect, you know, what's the shift is not trying to, well, it still comes back to like a perspective shift of not trying to say, you know, this is the garden that how it should be, and I need to keep it in that state all the time, you know. So think about your conventional landscaping. There's like a shape that the tree should have, and you should always keep the tree to that shape. And there's a shape that the bush should have, and everything has a specific, you know, a should. This should look like this, this should look like this, this should look like this, and I need to keep everything looking like it should. And so what I offer in regenerative gardening is that we kind of step away from that and say, okay, here's this soil, like, how can I help this soil express itself? How can I help this tree? You know, what is this tree asking of me? How can I assist this tree in her own expression? How can I assist this flower in her own expression? And you're kind of that helper. In traditional gardening, even in traditional organic gardening, the viewpoint is, okay, here's this tree. This tree needs all the nutrients. Pull out all the plants around this tree. Make sure there's no weeds around the tree, because they're going to be taking nutrients from the tree. And there's a competition going on, and there's a limited amount of energy, resources, and those need to be split between these separate beings. Regenerative gardening flips that on its head and says, we're not separate. This tree does not exist separate from the poppy and the oxalis and the fungi and the bacteria. And they're not in competition, they're in union. And there is no limit of resources. The idea of resources running out doesn't make any sense, because where are they going? Where is the water going to go? Where is the nutrients going to go? They're all still here on Earth. Like, there's no way to run out of resources. There's a way to misplace resources. So there's not a limited amount of resources for this tree. There's not a limited amount of resources for these plants. Together, they can learn to cooperate and thrive and share. And that includes, you know, the key part in regenerative gardening is that includes me. And that includes you. You know, that we are not separate. And, you know, I am not in competition with this tree, and I'm not in competition with you. So that's why I really try to emphasize, like, if it's not healing you, you know, then reconsider what you're doing. I hear a lot of people use that language of, you know, we're disconnected from nature. Well, how can we be disconnected from nature? How can we be disconnected from the earth? If you are the earth, how can you be disconnected from her? I learned a new word in the last 2 years that I think is a more accurate description. That word is dissociation. Dissociation meaning something that you are, but you no longer associate, you no longer recognize as yourself. And so for me, what I see is that we are no longer recognizing ourselves in the earth. We're no longer recognizing ourselves in soil, in plants, and trees. So it's not that we're disconnected. We can't be disconnected. We are dissociated. The key understandings that the garden has given me is that we are nature, and everything that we create is nature, and that there is no separation, right? The urban world is not separated from nature. Concrete is nature. Asphalt is nature. One of the things that's really struck me in my kind of learning and growth process is how our words and our language really blind us from seeing what's in front of us, what's actually happening. This is the one that kind of like eats at me when I listen to interviews and podcasts and stuff is this word natural. Oh, like what's more natural? We got to do what nature does. Follow nature's example. What's the definition that we're using there? And I actually looked this up. I looked up Oxford's definition of nature. It goes something like all plants, animals, insects, and their products as opposed to humans and human creations. How crazy is that? So we have this definition of nature and natural, which is that whatever is nature is whatever we didn't touch and whatever we didn't create, right? And then once we touch it, it's unnatural and it's like this terrible thing. And we're looking for something, right? When we say, oh, this is the natural way to do things, we have an idea of what that is, but we're using the wrong word. And that word is very important because every time we say, oh, natural food, natural product, natural this, look what nature does. Like, yeah, look what nature does. Nature poured this parking lot, So do we need to keep doing what nature does? Should I just pour parking lots everywhere? We need to look at what is healthy. What makes us feel whole? What's good what's not even good? What's energizing for us? And we always say, I need to find the root of the problem, right? And so even if we're looking for the root of the problem, we look for one root, right? And if you're a gardener, you know that the plant doesn't have one root. It has thousands of roots. And beyond that, it is not the roots of the plants are feeding the plant, but beyond that, the soil is feeding those roots, right? So I've begun to ask, what is the soil of the problem? What are the overall conditions that allow the problem to form? Because even in a garden, when you understand soil in a more deep way, the soil actually chooses the plant that grows. So a very fertile soil like what we've built here, it won't grow the spiny weedy plants. They won't grow in this soil because the soil has changed to the point where it doesn't want that plant. So I would ask, what is the soil of the problem? And so, is carbon the soil of climate change? No. Carbon is a symptom. Carbon is the plant, the weed, the so-called weed grown out of control, but carbon is not the problem. What is the soil of climate change? And the soil of climate change is really all up here. Everyone's like, oh, I care about Mother Earth. I care about Mother Earth. How much time do you spend with her? How much time do you spend actually listening to what she's saying? So before you try to fix anything, why don't you listen and see, what is she saying? What is the soil saying? The soil has suffered trauma. The trees have suffered trauma. We have suffered trauma. Like, we don't need to be fixed. We're responding exactly as we would to the trauma we've experienced. So what do we need? Well, we need community. We need to be able to express ourselves. We need to be able to process the trauma that we've experienced in a healthy way. We need to find healing, and we need to feel this. We need to reassociate with our body. What gardening really helps us do is understand, again, this relationship that It's not like I need to get back in connection with the earth. It's not that I need to, there's no bridge I need to cross, right? I just need to realize who I am.